Well, hello and welcome back to Crystal Confab. I'm Nicholas and I'm here to confab about crystals with some of my favorite humans. I'm joined by Ashley Levy, Adam Barrelay, and Kyle Perez. And this week we are diving deep into one of those stones that's been around for quite a long time, valued for a good chunk of human history, but I think is a little underappreciated in today's crystal world. And that stone is Bloodstone. Historically, it's been known as Heliotrope, a name we also give to sunflowers, which means to turn toward the sun, because in medieval lore it was associated with the sun and conquering things, as we might talk about later. And it's a variety of chalcedony, but it's not the only thing out there called bloodstone. And we've got this African bloodstone out there as well, which is a more translucent chalcedony with a breccia, a broken kind of fragmentary bit of the reddish jasper that's in there. Anyone else have some experience with stuff tonight? They might want to talk about comparing and contrasting the two.
Yeah, this is a stone that, I think became kind of popular on the market maybe like 2017, 2018, somewhere in there is where I really started to see it come out more. And it started being called African bloodstone. And then a lot of people dropped the African and just started calling it bloodstone, which has definitely created a bit of confusion with our dark green chalcedony that we're so used to seeing with those beautiful red spots, which is the bloodstone we're all here to confab about today. Um, I do think that the African bloodstone's really interesting. I can see how, at least symbolically, some of that energy still comes through in similar way to what we would have with our traditional bloodstone. You have these little red sort of patches, not quite spots. So, it doesn't have that same long historical use in lore that our regular bloodstone has. But there are some things about it that I think are interesting. I found that stone to be really, really grounding to help me when I'm feeling scattered. And I think that really has to do with that breccia. I always think of that as being something that pulls everything together. So that is one great way to work with that. But I do want to just really drive home with folks, and we were talking about this just before we started recording. Kyle actually brought this up that it's not exactly the same as our traditional bloodstone. And so if you see sort of that gray with the more angular red bits in it, those little breccia bits of the red jasper, not the same as the traditional bloodstone. It will have a little bit different quality to it. But I also find that that one is really good for dream work and dream recall, which I found interesting. I didn't expect because that is something that, at least in my experience, is vastly a different type of quality than I would expect from traditional bloodstone. Anybody else have experience with that?
I really love that avenue. For me, it has very much been a stabilizer. You can see here, like the jaspery redness and then that chalcedony kind of inclusioniness. Like it is definitely not the same stone. I think that clarity, the softer chalcedony really has a difference too. Like I think that could be where that dreaminess is coming in. I think all clearer chalcedonies have a really expansive and soft quality that I find really nurturing. But for me, the key word is stability. I love it for feeling that stabilizing effect. So that's my opinion.
Hmm. With the red dots in our true bloodstone, how do they actually form, Nicholas?
It's just small bits of iron oxide. So a lot of our chalcedonies form out of, to put it unscientifically, a goo made out of superheated silica. We would call that a colloid or a gel. And oftentimes, so as we've talked about in the past, things that are jasper-like aren't always actually jaspers, and also things that we could call jaspers aren't always formed in the same way as other chalcedonies. It's a really big umbrella term. So if this should form under the same conditions as most other true chalcedonies, then essentially it's just got some iron of a different valency in there, which is giving us most of the green color, and then iron oxide, little concentrations of that in crystalline form, in very small amounts, which are giving us the bright red spots. And they probably just separate out preferentially as that goo begins to harden.
Hmm. And as Nicholas mentioned before, it's got a long history, this stone. Many people may have heard the myth of the red is actually the blood of Christ falling upon the stone and that type of thing. But I believe this is a really great crystal also for helping us to kind of venture into the past and connect with our ancestors as well. Is that right, Ashley?
Yeah, this is one that I love for ancestral work. And, we've discussed this concept of ancestral work on the show before in our Garnet episode and probably quite a few others that aren't coming to mind right now. But Bloodstone, I think, does this in a little different way. So, a lot of times we get hung up on this idea of our ancestors just being familial. And there are so many different types of ancestors that we can connect with. And Bloodstone is one that really kind of helps you zoom out and get that bird's eye view of what your ancestral network can be. And this is a stone that I think really helps you connect with the spirit of the land, with the spirit of place as ancestor, with the plants, the rocks, the elements that surround you. So, recognizing that you are a part of that landscape, that you are a part of the world around you, not separate from it, and really honoring and revering all that came before you. So, thinking about that soil that grows the plants that you eat that nourish your body and like all of that kind of um, eventually returning back to the earth. We all came from the earth, we will all return back to the earth. And this kind of cyclical nature of being supported by our ancestors that came before us, and knowing that one day we will then become an ancestor. And so it is this stone that I think inspires a lot of right action. And, I'm sure many of you have heard like the phrase, like, be a good ancestor. That means like in your present, making those decisions, those choices of how we live, how we interact with the world around us that make a positive impact. And that could be leaving a small imprint. That could be inspiring others. That could be, there are so many ways that we can do that and lots of different ways simultaneously. And I think, especially right now when things feel so tumultuous, having that energy to sort of anchor into and ground into and remember that we are all strong, we are all supported, we have done hard things before and made it through. We will do hard things again, and that we don't have to do those hard things alone. That is a big lesson that I've personally been working on for a couple years, and a really good friend of mine reminded me that we don't have to do hard things alone. It's okay to ask for help when you need that support. And so tap into your local community, but tap into that ancestral community. So the way that I really love to do this with Bloodstone is to find a tree that I really love. If you're like me, maybe you have a few that you really love. Maybe it's in your yard, maybe it's at a local park, maybe it's one that you just stumble upon that you've never really met before. But take your bloodstone with you. Go sit on at the base of that tree. Let your spine sort of lean up against the strength of that tree trunk, the support of that tree trunk. Close your eyes, holding that bloodstone, however it's comfortable to you. You can hold your hands in your lap. You can hold this over your heart. You can hold it over your brow, like whatever feels comfortable. You can even set it on the ground in front of you. Place your hands over that stone so that you're touching the earth. But let your back, your spine, if it's comfortable for you and accessible to you, lean up against the strength and support of that tree trunk. Close your eyes and really breathe into that bloodstone. Let that energy just kind of anchor you to that spot, remind you that you are supported, that even when things feel tumultuous, there is a place of this stable, anchored calm, this sort of rigid, not unchanging energy, but stable energy that kind of just stays put, but bends and sways and like allows the change to sort of happen without getting swept away by it. And Bloodstone, I feel like just helps us tap into that. And once you've done that, just breathing, just feeling that in your body, I feel like it sort of charges that stone with the energy of that experience. And then you have that as this little pocket talisman, this little charm that you can keep with you and draw upon that energy throughout your day. Anytime you feel yourself getting swept up, overwhelmed, just holding that stone, taking a few deep breaths and tapping into that, you know, grounding support of the ancestors.
Actually, I found it really interesting how you talked about ancestors being broader than what we maybe think of usually. I guess when I've initially think of ancestors, I think of my grandparents, my great grandparents, and going down the lineage and that type of thing as well. Now I know for my personal lineage, it's very European based, but I find it interesting for myself and for other people how, although all my history and all my lineage is in Europe, I will have a drawing to other cultures around the world, like the ancient Egyptians that I have no connection to and different things like that. And I know many people experience that as well, where they're just drawn to one place. And do you think Bloodstone could help us to possibly explore that and maybe that our soul wasn't always coming down this lineage of a European one for me? It may have been darting around the world and help us dive into that as well.
That's a really interesting question. And I think there's definitely a lot to explore there. I think, like I said, we aren't just tapped into the ancestors that we have that are familial ancestors, but we have all of the ancestors of humanity, right? And I think that there are sometimes lessons that are accessible to us that come down in that sort of Jungian mass consciousness sort of way, right? Like there are things that are just collective knowledge and wisdom of humanity. So I think as long as we're being respectful, we're not encroaching on closed practices, things like that, then there's definitely a way that we can tap in and explore that in our current incarnation.
And it's a really like I find this crystal such a powerful yang kind of crystal. It has some real strength to it as well. And I guess when we think even from the name of blood, the blood coursing through our veins as well. Nicholas, do you find this is going to be a really good one for kind of empowering and strengthening people as well?
Yeah, so from the earliest written records that we've got of its use, this is a stone that's long been considered protective, whether inscribed with certain glyphs or images to conquer one's enemies or drive out, things that go bump in the night. It's been used for every kind of protection, and I think some of that definitely comes to that real visceral image of blood in us and how that is, in a very literal way, representative of our life force. If we don't have enough, we don't have life force. But there's something really interesting about the kind of movement that this stone implies. And I I understood, like I memorized a list of properties related to Bloodstone and was able to apply it to my life. But I had some aha moments when I was studying a practice called gemstone energy medicine, also just sometimes called gemstone therapy. And they've got some really interesting ideas about the kind of therapeutic effects of gemstones. And there's something about Bloodstone, and they have their own kind of applications for it, but there is a sense of movement in the way it mobilizes our forces, mobilizes our defenses, for anytime we feel vulnerable or threatened. So, if we feel as if we are overwhelmed by the energies of others, if maybe you feel like your immune system is over mobilized when exposed to some pollen. Like this is the kind of grounding stone that helps me get in touch with my body when I just need to find out where my defensive line might be. But if we start to look at the history of this stone and its makeup, there's a kind of thread that can be woven through. Although I mentioned earlier, it gets the folk name Heliotrope or Heliotropum because one particular medieval lapidary associated it with the sun. Earlier than that, we see a really strong Mars influence. And of course, before we had the birth of modern chemistry and geology and later gemology, we didn't necessarily have a clear idea of what the makeup and the chromophores, the color centers of this gemstone was. And yet there is this interesting affinity between Mars, the red planet, and the red flecks in this, and the blood in our veins, hemoglobin, also deriving its color from an iron component. And this quality of Mars is one that mobilizes things. We think of Mars as the god of war. He's out there moving toward the front line when we need protection. His drive and ambition get things moving when we feel stagnant. So for me, Bloodstone kind of envelops all of these things together and helps us kind of collect the resources that we've got to nourish and stabilize them if they're a little depleted or underwhelming, and then allows us to channel them in the direction that's going to give us the most leverage for change, enable us to really see some transformation take place. So we could use Bloodstone when we just feel the need for general protection, when our body or mind or spirit feels low energy, being able to find that sense of movement to get enough inertia to overcome our obstacles. And it's become a trusted friend ever since.
I have a question, Nicholas, and I don't know if you will know the answer to this or not, but I remember when I first learned about Bloodstone, turning to a lot of the historical sources, right? Because there's a lot written about this particular stone. And one of the things I know that Pliny the Elder said about this stone was that it was good for like invisibility. It was like a stone of invisibility. Do you know like where that comes from, what the thinking is, or if not, maybe like how would you interpret that for our sort of modern practice?
So there are a handful of stones that we see that get this really curious attribution. And this is one of the more notable ones, but we also see chrysoprase, which what we call chrysoprase, probably not what the ancients called it as well. And even topaz in some medieval and early Renaissance texts will get that kind of same quality. And I don't necessarily know what the psychology or the social circumstance was that initiated this, but it has become a tradition that has stuck around ever since. And my experience with this stone in terms of invisibility is not so much that, we're obviously not going to disappear in a puff of smoke. It's not, a cloak of invisibility that makes us blend in with our surroundings like we see in books and cinema. But there is something about really being able to walk in tune with everything around you, to find stillness or movement as needed to keep pace with everything going on that makes us not stand out. And, oftentimes I think the best defense is just being unnoticed. So if we really want a gemstone to protect us, it's not always about building, the 100-foot high wall around our castle, but maybe just not leaving a big footprint in your wake. And that may be part of it. I would probably need to do just a little bit more exploration to see like how this disseminated. This isn't a stone I've spent a whole lot of time like really doing the deep historical dive on, but this idea of bloodstone and invisibility is truly an ancient one.
Hey guys, I've just tried this invisibility thing. I think it does work.
Stop. Stop. You're funny.
And it's interesting, with that context of Bloodstone as well, it's really been one that I find a really great, like, physical healer as well. Kyle, have you used it in that kind of context much at all?
Honestly, it is the context that I work with Bloodstone. It is purely for my physical vessel. It has been a journey for me because chronic pain, I've talked about this in past episodes, is something that I am so blessed to deal with. And having bulging discs sounds really sexy, but it's actually not at all. And it causes all of these different flavors of pain and nerve pain throughout different parts of my body. And I've had it for over 15 years, and I'm not even 40. What it means is I have to be really careful about how I use my body. The irony of recording this episode after having a big weekend where I did lots and lots, and now I have a cold, is not lost on me. But I've been working with it again, and I love it, love it, love it. This is my favorite piece. It sits on my coffee table. It has so much of that reddy orange. It has those orbicular round spots, really dark green at the tip. And this chap sits on my coffee table because I am laying on my couch next to it quite a lot. And that's one of my things with Bloodstone. If you can keep it next to you when you are stationary, it can do so much for your physical vessel. It's allowed me to replenish. It allows me to know when I need to stop, when I need to go further. It allows me to utilize what energy I have better and more efficiently, which I think is really, really cool. I find it, as we touched on before, stabilizing and supportive and kind of grounding in a way that I find really practical. For me, I don't know about everyone else, but I find it very Capricornican. Like it has this practicality to it that enables you to do what you need, or for me personally, what I need for my body in a way that is practical for my resources, my time, my energy, and all of that sort of stuff. So if your body is like, I am sore, I need a massage, blah, 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 can't afford to do that regularly. We have a massage head on our shower. I'll spend an extra 5 minutes making sure I am giving myself a little bit of that. If I'm laying down, I'm going to make sure my legs are up on pillow so that I can take the pressure off, give my body what it needs. And I'm listening to that as it is talking. I'm standing up, cooking in the kitchen, and I'm like, my back's sore. I actually need to put shoes on. Like, there are all these little things that I now listen to and hear because my body's like, if you don't do it, it's going to hurt later. This is what you need in the now. This is what's going to support you now. And I always have these kind of double ups. This is an example, these beautiful palm stones, these kind of weird geolith bits. I'll always get pairs that I can hold and hold properly. I find tangibility with stones for the physical body, I think, really important because it helps us to, I can feel it, it's connecting to my body and it's working on my body. That, like, I think is really important. So if you need to put it in your bed, under the mattress, next to your bedside table, you could put it, as I have, on the coffee table, in your couch, maybe underneath the cushions, anywhere that you are sitting maybe for a long time, a desk that you're at for a really long time, when your body is requiring you keeping an eye on it, because whenever we're stagnant for too long, quite often we need to move. Like, quite often we actually need to, as Nicholas mentioned, get that inertia going and start the momentum and start things moving. And when I was looking into things with it, I found really interesting the iron component, obviously, so much to do with our physical vessel, but it also chlorite comes up and hornblende. Two really interesting things. Chlorite for me has been very healing in many different ways, and hornblende, being an amphibole, has that kind of strength and stability. Bringing that with that iron force is such a cool combination, don't you think? Like, and the silica at its base, it's this really fascinating combination when you actually look at it. It's not just this inert green kind of with bits of red. It's this really complex, deep, what do I need? We are complex human beings. We are complex at our core, and we all need different things. We're all talking about the different ways that we're working with it. And for me, it has been such a physical thing. And I think that's really, really cool about it. And I think the more I work with it, the more I love it. It's one of those daily crystals for me. So it's always around.
Okay, point of controversy for discussion
Yes.
because Kyle showed his beautiful Bloodstone wand and it had a whole lot of that beautiful burnt reddy orange and some green toward the carved termination. At what point do we classify it not as bloodstone, but as maybe like a fancy jasper or something like that? Because I know like bloodstone we can get from Brazil, we can find it in India, like we can find it in a few places. When I look for a bloodstone, I am so old school. I want like just that field of dark green and I want to see clear little spatters of red. And the ones that have a lot more red are super gorgeous. I just got some palm stones for the shop and there was one in there that was like almost all red and it was beautiful. I had to pick it up and put it in the batch anyway, even though it's totally the different than all the other ones. But like because my human brain wants to put things in their neat little boxes, How do we all feel about where that like delineation kind of stops? Or do we not care? We just go, it has all the same stuff, it's good. Who cares if the pattern is a little different?
I'm really not sure, to be honest. This one for me has always stuck out as an anomaly, as a piece of Bloodstone. Absolutely. Like, I truly don't know exactly where it comes from. I just remember seeing it and needing it and knowing that, like, I'm a weirdo, so I go for the weirdos. Like, that's how I roll. So I don't feel like, for me, it doesn't feel like a fancy Jasper. I've worked a little bit with fancy Jasper. I've got some bracelets that I've worn, and I really love it's. I find fancy Jasper a bit more subtle. Maybe I think that for me is maybe a bit of delineation, whereas Bloodstone for me always has this force, and you're not going to like ignore the force that is there. The force is strong with us. I don't know why I'm doing Star Trek, crossing things.
I like that description. I think that's probably true. Nicholas, what do you think about this?
So particularly in the materials that we see coming out of India, there's a lot of, we'll say, friendliness among a few different materials. And when you find like the drilled beads and stretchy bracelets. They're often a melange, a salad of all of these different materials that comes together. So as you mentioned, we've got the fancy jasper, but they also get moss agates from the same region. They have onyx and or sardonyx coming out of the same holes in the ground, and then our bloodstones. And oftentimes the difference between them is entirely subjective. Um, and it depends on where someone has cut the piece that we end up with. So, if I get someone on a rare day that I'm at the shop, if I get someone who really wants a bloodstone bracelet, then we find the best lighting we can. We pull all of the fancy jaspers and we go, okay, well, one of these is going to have some bloodstone beads, and let's talk about why. And then someone else wants a moss agate bracelet. I'm like, good news, let's go to the fancy jasper because there's a lot of moss agate in these because they're the difference between these is often just shades of variation, and how they're cut makes a big difference. When we see like the Shiva eye agates, it's exactly the same material. They've just been cut into a shape that enhances the bands between them instead of separating the strata. Same with a lot of the sardonyx that comes from there. It's not the traditional colors we see in sardonyx, but it's what we have come to accept. So I think it's okay to blur the lines and to arbitrarily designate what we like as being associated with these terms.
I'm really glad we're talking about this because so often, and I'm sure this has happened to all of us, you'll get sent pictures from someone on Instagram or Facebook or something, and they're like, "Can you identify my stone?" And I'm like, "It's kind of like three things smushed together. Like, I can't put it in a box for you. You got to make a call here." And I think this is one of those stones that definitely goes in all those directions. So thank you so much, Kyle.
It's one of those things. When I did my gemology degree, it's the black stones and the dark green stones that you have to spend so much extra time on trying to figure out what they are. So if we have to work extra hard, the general public are obviously going to have that difficulty too. So try not to put too much pressure on yourself. These two are definitely the most challenging colors to work through when it comes to minerals.
What are you guys saying? Do you not enjoy getting blurry, poorly lit crystals sent to you going, can you tell me what on earth this green crystal is? No, yeah, we love that. There's actually a
No
really
comment.
great page on Facebook. I think it's called Fossils, Minerals, and Crystal Identification. It's run by more a group of geologists, and you basically post pictures in there. It's got like, I don't know, 50,000 people in there. That's a really good one for, people to kind of hash it out and fight through. But yes, we love helping our followers and our clients and our customers, but sometimes it can be a bit challenging with those ones, can't it? Yeah,
No blurry photos. No blurry
blurry
photos.
photos with a flashlight on them, which takes out half the color. Yep, I love them. I love them. Carl, I'm really interested in what you're talking about health, and it reminded me of a story that I used to share quite often because I find bloodstone to be a really beautiful. I call it one of my Panadol crystals. It's kind of an all-round fixer in that type of way. But I think, my approach when it comes to physical healing, especially, is that you've got to look at what the body needs. And, Nicholas was talking about it being a very Mars like crystal, and it has been historically. And I find it really yang and powerful in that way as well. And I've reminded of someone who came into the shop, the crystal shop I was working in that time, and she said, "Hi, I want to get a bloodstone because I'm just on day release from the hospital at the moment, and I've been reading, and I keep reading that this is a really good one for healing." I said, "Yeah, sure, it definitely is. Let's have a look. But if I can be a little bit nosy, can I ask what you're having challenges with?" And she said, "Well, I've got an issue at the moment where my immune system is attacking itself, and that's causing all different problems in my body." So I then had a bit of a chat to her about, this is kind of a, I think it's a great crystal for when we need to get the heart pumping a bit more or the circulation going, or we need to fire up the immune system. So it's a really great one if you do have a cold or a flu. But when we have these kind of where like her system was over um, overactive, that maybe we need to look at maybe getting more of a yin crystal in that way. So I tend to, as I call my Panadol crystals, I find that red garnet and bloodstone are really good when the body needs firing up in order to defeat something. But I find Amazonite and amber really good as your yin ones to actually help calm the body down. And after having a conversation with her, she felt a lot more comfortable actually going with an Amazonite instead. And I'd love to know everyone's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to crystals for that physical body healing, I am I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm so skeptical. I'm super into the woo, super into crystals, but I think it's so important for everything that we do to be like really grounded in science and also really grounded in responsibility too. And so obviously crystals, and all of us would agree with this, are never ever meant to be a replacement for medical treatment. So you have to see your physician, your surgeon, your psychologist, your psychiatrist, whatever it is, you have to get that traditional medical care. And where crystals come in is as an energetic support, right? They're working on that subtle level to support us through all those other things that we're doing for our healing. For example, I also, like Kyle, I have chronic pain. Am I going to work with my crystals to help support me? Yes. Am I also going to go to my chiro? Am I also going to go to my pain specialist? Yeah, I'm going to do all those things, right? We're using all the tools in our toolbox. But the other thing that I think is really important to consider is looking, because crystals work on that subtle level, looking underneath the layers for kind of the symbolism of what might be happening. I think because most people are used to how we approach things in the medical world, that's the experience that when they are having a physical problem, they think, oh, problem, what's the crystal solution? And that's just not how it works exactly because the energy is so different. So, for example, when I have a headache, I'm not necessarily looking for a crystal for my headache. I'm taking a look at that headache. I'm thinking, what's going on right now? Am I really overstimulated? Am I stressed? Am I getting enough sleep? What is kind of going on with me? And maybe it's that I'm really overstimulated and stressed. So I go, okay, what crystal can really support me right now? Maybe I need a good stone for grounding. Maybe I need something to bring a little peace and calm, remind me to just breathe a little bit. So it's not like I'm necessarily thinking, headache problem, what's the crystal solution? I'm looking a little bit deeper than that. But I think there's also things that we can do um, not just looking at kind of maybe the root cause of what's going on, but also the symbolism, right? So the head being associated maybe with the intellect, maybe with the air element, with our mental clarity. Maybe I need something for a little clarity of thought because there's just a lot coming at me and it's kind of a lot of energy. So what will sort of cut through that and open things up, right? Maybe that headache is like pressure. What would take the pressure off? Not physically, but energetically, symbolically, right? Maybe a crystal to create a little bit more spaciousness, a little bit more openness, like some gypsum, something like that. So I think, we need to really consider that when we're looking at the ways that crystals do support us physically.
I think that's the whole point of this confab, right? Is we're all giving our different ways that we work with these different minerals, these different crystals. We're all clearly coming at them from very different places. And I think every episode has shown that. Like, no one person is going to experience the same medicine the same way, right? This is why there's always a list of possible side effects. This is why certain people can handle certain things and other people can't. This is why we have our limits and our balances. And this is why we talk about it like this, is because we are all different humans experiencing the world in different ways, and nothing is going to work exactly the same for you as it does for that person. And it's also not going to work exactly the same for you today as it did yesterday, because you're a different person and you've evolved and you've grown and you've changed. And I think that's like, crystals are an amazing support, but we are living a practical life on this planet. What are we able to do? What should you be doing to support yourself, and what help do you actually need? We always need to make sure that we're open to those things. And these beautiful, wonderful, sexy little crystals can help us. If we stop and listen to them and their energy, they can even guide us to the appropriate actions that we need to take as well, so that we can go and see the doctor or the psych. We can go and do those proper things that are important to the living of the life of the spirit of the human that we are.
And I think we should, I'd love to give a shout out to authors like Louise L. Hay and even Ina Segal. They have really great books like You Can Heal Your Life that explore, and science is catching up in a slow way between how much our physical well-being and our emotional mental well-being are interlinked. And Louise L. Hay, she has this amazing book. She's passed now, but this book, the legacy continues on, called You Can Heal Your Life. And what she's done is, for every part of the body and everything that kind of goes wrong with the body, she looks at the thoughts that come behind that. And as Ashley was saying, energetically, that's the level that crystals work. So if we keep on being around a certain energy, whether it's in our environment or a thought pattern that we keep having, eventually that kind of condenses into the physical. So by the time you've got that sore knee or that headache or your pancreas is playing up, it's almost too late for the crystals, but you can then go on that journey with the crystals to start unraveling that energetic cause that might be manifesting that in way as well. So I think I have an app on my phone from Louise L. Hay, and I find that a really good reference of kind of going, oh, okay, sore ankle, what could that mean? That could mean not being flexible, and then I think what crystal might be great for that. For me, it's kyanite, and then I'd work with kyanite and think about, okay, where am I not being flexible in my life, and that type of thing as well. And that's how I approach the healing. So yeah, I think we're all in agreement that if someone suddenly realizes they've got cancer, they shouldn't be going to the crystal shop. They need to go to their health professional first. Yeah, awesome. Now, it's really great that we're actually having this big discussion about health, because it's really going to come into focus this coming week, because we have a full moon. It's a full moon in Virgo, and Virgo is the sign of physical health and well-being, but it's a special one as well. It's a blood full moon. So different from a blue moon, where the moon does not turn blue. A blood full moon you will have in certain parts of the planet. You'll actually see the moon turn red, and this is a bit of a rare occasion. And you may start to see a bit of a flare up throughout this week of all the the girly magazines and all the bloggers and that talking about how this can be a bit of a dangerous time or a wary time and that. And when you look historically, different cultures have really looked at this full moon in different ways. Some cultures have, thought that this is a time when demons and dragons were coming to, possibly get you. I know in some cultures they'd actually take the king off his throne during a blood full moon and put someone else as a substitute in, just in case that the king got, attacked by demons or anything like that type of thing. But in other cultures, it's seen as quite virtuous as well. And I'm of the belief that everything on this earth and everything in the heavens is here to support us. So I really look at the blood moons as being a really auspicious time. For me, the blood moons allow us to go a little bit deeper, a little bit more animalistic, a little bit more soul leveled, and look at the aspect of our life in a deeper way. So what we have is we have this blood moon, which is really quite spiritual, But then we have Virgo, which is looking at our physical health and our well-being, and sometimes they're like on the opposite ends of the scale. But I think this is a beautiful time for us all to explore and honor our body and what we need for our body. Our body is, we only get one, and it is basically the vehicle you get to drive through life. And you may not think that, oh, okay, well, eating my vegetables and getting outside and getting some fresh air and some exercise is a very spiritual thing to do. But we all know how we feel when we feel rubbishy. The last thing we feel like doing is meditating or, any of our spiritual practices. And so looking after your physical vessel and making goals and intentions and doing healings and different things like that can be a really great thing to help evolve spiritually. And I think working with Bloodstone this week, making an intention on this blood full moon in Virgo, and it just so happens because I'm working on a project for 2026. Next year, we also have a blood moon in Virgo again, which is really, really rare. So I would even maybe sit down and set some intentions, do some workings towards what you'd like to bring into your life, and kind of scribble that down on a bit of paper, keep it in the front of your head, but then think about next year when it happens later in the year in 2026, go, okay, how am I going with that? And how can I up level it again? So we see around the world, health challenges that people weren't experiencing 30 years ago, and a rise of different physical and mental ailments that weren't around. Maybe it's time that you found the way to get back to nature, get back to working with your crystals and finding that health and healing as well. So I think Bloodstone is the perfect crystal to give you that courage and that motivation and that determination to start honoring your body. And everyone considers themselves to be healthy. I never talk about how can we get healthy. I'm like, how can we up level? I bet no one listening or watching believes that they're a 10 out of 10 when it comes to sleep and nutrition and flexibility and all those different things. So maybe looking at, okay, well, where am I scoring low on those kind of factors? And where can I bump up and start working on that in this full moon?
I love this conversation, Adam, because I've been thinking a lot about, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are getting ready to head back into spring. It's going to be gardening season soon. It's been a long, cold winter, especially where I live. Winter's a big chunk of the year. So we just had snow actually until last week, about a foot of it, and it finally melted. So I'm like getting ready to sow my seeds and do all kind of things. And I know I am like woefully out of shape. And the first couple weeks of gardening are really going to kick my behind because it's a lot more physical stuff than I'm used to, just sitting in my warm, cozy house all winter. So it seems like Bloodstone could be a really good companion for helping me, A, get that little bit of motivation to get back outside, but B, just be kind of really supportive throughout that process to like help keep me going toward where I feel like, comfortable doing some of those things that are downright hard as a gardener.
Yeah, I think this is a beautiful one to work with whenever you need to kind of, especially this, I guess it's like trying to move a train or something, with all that cargo behind it. It's that initial start. And I looked at where my body was at the start of this year, and I'm like, I was the heaviest I've ever been. And I was like, you run up at some stairs and you're like, I need to sit down for 5 minutes. And I'm like, that's not good, kind of thing. So I've started working with a personal trainer, but sometimes it is those first few sessions, or I've just been away for a few days and going back to the personal trainer yesterday. That's where it really kind of kicks your ass, and that's the hard bit is starting. And I think this blood moon in Virgo, aligned with Bloodstone, could be a really great way for a lot of people just to make those first starts because it gets easier the longer, the more momentum you have going behind you.
And also like long-term goals, like to make these long-term physical goals. I really like the idea that there's another blood moon next year in Virgo. So I am personally going to set a 1 to 2 year goal plan to see what I can do in the next year and then to see how I need to reset with it next year, because physical planning is something that I'm very conscious of at the present moment.
Yeah, and I was just inspired to kind of share. As I said, I wanted to lose a few kilos or a few pounds. And so what I did, and this could be a good thing to do for the full moon, is instead of going, right, I'm here and I want to be here. I actually worked out where I want to be, and I used good old Chat GPT, and I said, "Can you divide this, but into weekly increments?" So each week now, I'm like, and I go, "Oh," I jump on the scales, and I'm like, "Oh, I've still got so far to go." I'm like, "Have I done my little goal for this week?" And I'm actually ahead of my goal, and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces can be really good. So even doing a bit of work, we don't have to just do spiritual work around the full moon. We can kind of use that energy to put our magic and our intention behind it. I'm going, okay, let's set little goals, and can I do it week by week by week? Bite-sized pieces make it really more manageable rather than going, I'm here and it's going to be impossible to get there type of thing.
A billion percent agree. A
Yeah.
billion percent agree.
Now, before we wrap up, we did. Oh, sorry, Ashley, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was just thinking that's actually like a really good way to work with Bloodstone in general. Just breaking down those really big things that seem a bit overwhelming, maybe a bit full on into little things that we can do along the way. So, whether that's a health goal or that's a goal for starting your meditation practice or a goal for a big project, just having that be a companion to keep up that motivation and support throughout the process.
Mm. I know we talked about it last week, Ashley, but can you do a little bit more of a shameless self promotion for your course that I know is in full happening now, and you're taking on applicants?
Yes, so I am hoping, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but by the time that this episode comes out, we may have already filled up all of our spots. I've actually limited enrollment to 50 spots this time so we can create a little bit more of an intimate container for all of the classes. Today, that we're recording is the first day of enrollment, and we are a good way of the way there. We've had 19 people enroll already out of 50. So there may or may not be just a couple spots left. Discounted enrollment is supposed to end this Friday, but if there are any spots available, if you message me, I will try to sneak you in. You can contact me at ashley@loveandlighthealingschool.com and I can send you all the details if we do have any last minute spots to sneak you in when this comes out. But if you are too late and you've missed this enrollment, don't worry. We will open one more time later this spring during the first week of May. So we will have some additional spots available then after we get our new students settled in. And there's also an opportunity to get started with an introductory course if you just want to kind of stick a toe in and see what it's all about. You can learn more about that at loveandlightschool.com.
And we've also got links below in, or wherever you're watching this on a video or listening to a podcast, check out our links below and check that out there. I'm going to jump in with a shameless self promotion as well. If you'd like to actually meditate with Bloodstone, especially around this blood full moon, I've got a meditation on iTunes. I've got a series of 8 different albums, and it's album 2. The health and wealth one has a Bloodstone meditation in it. Goes for just under 20 minutes, takes you through relaxing, letting go of the day, connecting with your bloodstone, and then going on a bit of a journey with it in that way as well. So that can be another way to kind of help you get that deeper connection. But apart from that, I think we've confabbed enough about this amazing crystal, and hopefully one of those regular ones, which I think was probably one of the first crystals I ever bought because it was one of those good old trusty ones many years ago. Hopefully, we brought it back to the forefront of your mind and it's come to the top of your crystal shelf and brings you greater health and motivation and drive and connecting with your ancestors and all that. We'll be back next week to confab about another amazing gift of Mother Earth. Until then, take care and blessed be.